post all the information in Slack. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm always late. All right. Okay, seems that it's all working fine. Okay. Okay, hopefully everybody, even the remote students, can listen in. Okay, so let me get started. Okay, that looks good. All right. Show screen. Okay, so not everything is working. Why the projector is not working? Oh, okay. Okay, I'll try to remember that one. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll restart where we left with the course material because it's more related to the lab, so we'll finish that up quickly. Okay, so these are things that I mentioned during the lab last week. So I'll go quickly about it, but they're good things to keep in mind. So whenever you run code in your browser, what is happening is that your browser runs in a confined environment where you can access data through some protocols that are allowed. So the typical is to use HTTP protocol that allows you to communicate with remote servers. And that means also that the browser is running with protection so that it cannot usually access files on your drive. So in order to do this HTTP here and debug your scripts, you will need to have it set up as we did in the labs, where we run a virtual server locally on the local machine to emulate basically this setup. Yeah. So this you see in the URL in the box there. So you see there that I'm running a local server, and that's because the URL starts with localhost, and what follows there is the port number that was started with the page that we're requesting. Now, if you open a file by just double clicking it, then the won't be able to see it unless, I think, yeah, Chrome is hiding it, but there the URL starts with http://. So if you double click a file on your drive, it's going to start with file that is a different protocol than the HTTP. And that has all the restrictions that we discussed a moment ago. So what browser can do is basically they render HTML, CSS, and HTTP. We're going to see what these are. And the glue that allows you to control all of this in the page is the JavaScript. On the server, you can also run JavaScript. That's usually done with Node, and that you're now familiar with it. So you can run your server in Node. In that case, you have what is called a stack. Otherwise, there are other servers that have been implemented in C, C++, and other languages. What the server does usually is that it listens up on a port, something that's what you see there, and it's going to return files or data according to what you ask. So the data usually they're encoded in CSV or JSON, and the files that they have the extension .html. The default files when implemented on the server is index.html. So if you don't put a file name and there is an index.html, you get that automatically. Okay, so I'm stressing this point because this is most of the complexity with working with data in the browser for visualizing it. And the reason is that you need to keep doing this request. So the first time you ask for the page, then the page has some JavaScript that references some CSV file that you want to load. So then you need to do another HTTP request to ask for that. Then you need to wait to get the data, that takes time, also to the page. And once you have that, then you can put it. You can use the JavaScript to basically throw things as you expect. Now all this is working asynchronously. Originally, this was the name that was done to give it to this mechanism that is asynchronous JavaScript and HTML. And it's still what it's called, but today you'll hear more about promises and other forms of doing this that with JavaScript code that we're going to look at. Yeah, so maybe the last point is that whenever you want to do a graphic and you have a lot of data, there are different ways to do in order to load the data so that you don't block the page. So we're going to take a look at that also as we go through the course. All right. So quickly, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'll give you some basics. We already saw some of those, and I think that you're familiar with most, but you need to keep track of that. Yeah, actually, yeah. Let me give you a motivational slide here. So this is from Canada that has a COVID-19 page to keep their people up to date. And so here you can see this in action. So this is typically a custom dashboard that they built here. And so they've created this map. Here you see that they put a legend so that people can understand what the map is about. And then you have interaction also. So when you mouse over and click, you see that the different things happen. Both the main graphic and other graphics seems to be related, and they keep updating. And you see that this is not just happening at once, but it's happening with what is called the position, so it changes slowly enough so that you can notice that there is movement and you go and look at it, because otherwise you wouldn't realize it, especially when it's a little thing. Then they've got other things that are typically pages such as buttons and so on that allow you to do even more with that kind of thing. So the goal here is really to get you to the point where you can do this by yourself. Okay, so I'll get back to this. And so because of the motivational slide, you need to learn some of the HTML and some of the CSS that allows you to style things in the page, and some of the SVG that allows you to do the drawings. So HTML is just a language that defines a specification for how pages are structured, and you usually have this notation with a tag, which is in this form. The tags can have attributes with values, and things need to be set up as strings, or if you don't put the string, then it might be in some cases it works if the attribute is numerical. In that case, you can put just a number in pixel, but this is the standard way to do it, and then you would qualify it. If it's a number of pixels, you would put 100 px after, so that the tag can actually get its correct value. You can reference in the HTML for the purpose of think about the map that we just saw. If you want the graphic to the line chart story tool that was on the right side to update when you interact on the map, then you need to basically be able to call that line chart. And usually those are graphed into a tag. And then you have two mechanisms here to reference things in the page. So one is the class. So this is usually used for CSS. So if you want all of your charts to use the same look and feel, then you can specify the CSS as a class, and then you're going to put the class in here for all your charts. If you want to refer to a particular chart, then you would use the ID instead. Now, you can only put one ID in a page. There is no enforcement, similar to any other mistake that you would do in writing HTML pages. So if you are allowed to go and write multiple IDs, and nobody's going to tell you if that's good or bad. But eventually, every browser has its own way of deciding which one is going to use silently. Again, because users don't know about the string, so you don't want to bother them. But in your case, you'll need to be careful with that when you debug it. So these are the basic elements, and I think that you're familiar with them, that we put in our page. So the HTML is the tag for the page. Those that are important to know are the body. So everything that is visible needs to be in the body. So if you put stuff outside, it's not going to happen. In the edge, you can load scripts. So if you want to preload things, this is going to be loaded before the body. So that's one way to interact with the page and work out this asynchronous programming that will show up. Headers, paragraphs, divs and paragraphs, basically the same thing, just a different semantic attached to it. So this is mostly for text, but the div is just a block element. And we're going to see what that means. EM is doing what I think. It look written in italic by default. Strong for B is for bold. A is for the hyperlink. And SVG, probably you've seen it already in the iframe code. So you know what it is. Yeah, I think that's about it. Okay, so this is a template. So whenever in Visual Studio Code, you can also, I think there is a function that allows you to get a template by default. But this is really the minimum that you want in there. So this is according to the specifications. If you don't put it, the browser will deal with it, and that's fine. The head, same thing. If you don't put it, the browser is going to put an empty title and empty head. And the body is really the thing that you really need. So yeah, if you forget to put the HTML or the body, then the browser will decide when it's time to close it, and hopefully is the correct thing to do. But yeah, you can get into nasty bugs, those little things. SVG. So SVG is essentially, so if we look back at this page here, everything in here is SVG. To put it simply, all these are line paths. So sorry, path element. This is the SVG path element. This is done with SVG circle. This is SVG text. Same thing here for the text. These are probably a line segment. You can obviously interpolate those and so on, and we're going to see how you can do it. Yeah, and because SVG is HTML, everything that has to do with customizing it, you can do with the CSS. And we're going to say a word about take here, for instance, that you're changing the stroke or the fill of the CSS object. Okay, so these are here. You see some simple example of circle, text, and rectangle. So noticeably, you see that the arguments are differently named between the rectangle and the circle. That's the usual cause of error, where the circle is CX, CY for the center, and R for radius. The rectangle is XY width and height. Yeah, and then you have the fill and stroke that I mentioned. That we'll look at that more carefully whenever we'll get to the CSS that is right now. So CSS means cascading type sheets, and they basically define how things look in the page. So the basic thing that you need to know is one that the attributes that you use are differently named between SVG and HTML, so they don't necessarily match. You want to be careful with that. So in general, you have three ways to use the CSS. So here we're seeing on a paragraph element. So if you want to do it inside the element, you can use the style attribute as shown here. So this is setting the color, and this is similar to write the JavaScript object notation without the object. So you would separate those with a comma if you want to put more. So key value pair, and those needs to be standard. There are different ways to specify the code. We'll see how to do it. You can also embed it, similar to the way you embed an HTML script. You use a style tag as opposed to a script tag, and this is the way you would write the same. Yeah, so here it's in the comment there. I don't know, maybe just space. External is the third way where you can put all your CSS into a file, basically in this form, and then you load the file in this way with a link. With a link, yep. So I mentioned this way of using the class and ID to reference to objects in HTML. So based on that, there is a whole way of selecting properties that you want your CSS to act on, or objects in the HTML elements. Sorry. So if you want to select, so those are called selectors, and that's basically the rule that we're talking about this part. So this is the selector, and this is the actual CSS that customizes the tags on the selector. So here the selector is a paragraph that is just a simple HTML element. You could replace it with a div. In that case, you would select all the CSS customization would go on the div. If you want to apply the style to all the elements within a class, then if the class is echo as here, then you would start it with a dot. For the ID, you would put a pound. Okay. And in that case, only if there is an element that has the same ID in the page is going to get colored or customized in that way. So if you do one element dot another tag name there, then what you're saying is that you're looking at the div elements that are inside elements with this class. So sorry, wrong. It's div elements that have a class before. Sorry. The inside is if you put a space. So be careful with this one because intuitively you think of it as the JavaScript object notation. So the dot is acting on the div, so it's div with this class. If you put a space, it means that you're looking for these elements inside this one, and that's done so that you can nest multiple levels. If you put a comma, it means that you want to apply the style to all of the specifications that are listed in the list. That is comma separated. So here so here is the same thing is the IDs that are inside the div. Here are IDs, divs with ID row, and I think the last one is just a simple example of the space. I think space there, so here would be yeah, you start reading from the end, so it's elements plus class who that are inside a paragraph that are inside the yeah, maybe I should have mentioned. So this rule they're done because obviously the HTML you can create a hierarchy of the HTML elements. So you can have a paragraph inside a paragraph that is inside a div, and so on. So these are some examples. You can just look at it, and the description is there. So this is just for you, so that you wrap your head around those. And these are some simple examples of quiz questions that you might be asked. JavaScript. So JavaScript was created by folks at a company that doesn't exist anymore. Sun Microsystem. Was somewhere here, but at the time the idea was, yeah, I think it's Netscape. So Netscape doesn't exist anymore either, but they did one of the first implementation of a browser. And so at the time they had animated pictures, essentially with GIFs, and very little in terms of page interaction. And so they wanted to build a system that built a standard for the browser that would allow to implement interaction. And so at the time, Sun was developing Java, and JavaScript sounded like Java. So they thought that it would be a good business decision to go with that, and that as the browser became one of the prime means that we have to interact with things that are distributed in internet cloud. It's still there. It has stuck, so we're left with working with it. So obviously, because of the browser, JavaScript is kind of the most used language. Yes, more than Python. Okay, so this you just want to keep them in mind, and I think with the little example that I gave you speaks to that. So JavaScript is useful for implementing user interaction. If I click a button, what happens? If I do a mouse over, what happens to the page? Asynchronous communication. This is for loading data. So you can request data or pages or whatever you like from servers remotely, so that you can realize your plots. You can control the browser, so you can open windows and typically opening one page in a different tab and so on. And then obviously you can alter the content, which means basically you can apply some different CSS rules. You can add, remove HTML elements, etc. So that's what it allows you to do. And we're going to see how to do that in the context of the graphics, obviously. So web pages. How do you use JavaScript in web pages? You saw this already. You use the script tag. You can do it online, or you can again do it external. External means that you create a page that is called with a .js, and you put your code in there, and then you load it in this way with the script tag where you use the source element. Now you don't need to call these things .js. It's customary to do so. As with everything, even the JSON files or CSV files, the extension usually can be omitted, but it's a good way for people to understand what they're doing. So main things about the language is object-oriented. That's why we can say object dot, right? Everything is mutable. Can somebody tell me what that means quickly? Mutable. It's same meaning as in Python, yeah. Yeah, you can change. So you can change basically any variable anywhere. So everything is public. There is no private interface. There is a way to take that, to talk about it, but you can change anything. So this is a big problem because a lot of time there are things that you don't want to change, and you change without paying attention, and then you end up with bugs. We need to do dynamic typing. So somebody can have an idea about dynamic typing? Exactly. So the browser basically looks at the JavaScript code, and whenever it sees a variable, it looks at it and it says, "Oh, this looks like a string, so I'm going to give it a type of string." Okay. Function are a label scope. So yeah, probably this one you don't know what it is, but we're going to talk about it in a second. And first-class functions, probably you don't know either. So basically, that means that functions are objects, are like any other object. So you can pass a function to a function as an argument. You can use it as any other object in the language. Yeah. So these are basically example of every one of those. So the object, you remember, is that they're treated with the 30 places. They're usually called object literal because you write it this way. And you remember that you can either use single quote or double quotes. Same story. That's not a big problem. Whenever you want to access the keys in the key value pairs, you just prefix it with a dot, and that's what you get. Okay, so the mutable, it means that any place anywhere you can just change what you like inside the object or outside, if they're just bare variables, and you get what you expect. That's you're not aware. Primitive types here, you see what is happening. So here the browser, we declare. If you declare variables with var, it means that it's some kind of variable. And then the JavaScript interpreter is left to figure out what it is. So these are Boolean values, because true or false are Boolean facts. The null, you see that he has the special type, that is the null type, and the undefined type. So whenever if you I didn't do it here in the example, if you just say var foo, then what you get is an undefined variable by default. So this is the default of a variable that doesn't be declared anyway. The numbers, you can see them there, and the string. So there is obviously the object type and a bit more than that, but these are the main ones that usually you have to deal with. So the function level scope, so this has to do with where the variables live. So if you declare a variable as here var b is going to live in this function. Here I declare it outside of the function. So these and these are different. They have different scope. But the scope is the function is not the block as you have in C or C++ or Python, where if you do a for loop, for instance, you can declare your variable in there. Here, if I put a for loop, the variable is going to be declared as part of the function. Now, that obviously leads to a number of problems that we're going to maybe see in a second. So I won't get into it now. First class function, here you see some example of passing, here declaring a function and passing it to another function. Here we have a function that returns a function. That's also allowed. Now, this is a way of doing encapsulation that we can quickly take a look at. But before, let's talk a little bit more about the hoisting. So whenever the JavaScript interpreter is going to look at your script, he's going to make some decision of where the variable is. So the scope we said is the function scope. And that what that means is the variable lives within the function. However, that only means that so that only applies really to the declaration of the variable. The value is set still in the function. So, and that's basically what is referred to as hoisting. So if you declare a variable in any place in the script, whenever the browser reads and the JavaScript interpreter goes through the code, is going to take the declaration of the variable and put it at the top of the scope. So if you have one script and you have a var, so this is your script. Let's say that this is example.js. This var A here is defined in the scope of the JavaScript file, and that is called the top of the scope. And so this variable that is the first line here, if I'm the JavaScript interpreter, I'm going to look at it and say, okay, that's good. It's in the global scope of the script, and it's the first line. It's just a declaration. I'm going to leave it there. A2 is a initialization. I'm taking the variable and I'm giving it a value, and so this is going to also to stay where that is for the moment. Then I go to var b. Now var b is also in the global scope of script, but it should be at the top of it. So then I'm going to take it and move it up here. Okay, and so you do this both for the global and also for those that are say within a function. So this variable a and b, they are in the scope of the function, so they're going to. This is equivalent to declaring the variable a and b inside the function at the top of the scope of the function. Okay. Assignment stays where it is. The declaration goes to the top of the scope, and it's function scope. And so here you see basically this rewritten with that logic in mind. Okay. Now people get mad with these things, and so you have a way to work around it, but sometimes you don't have a choice because people wrote this code and then something doesn't work. So you need to understand how this plays out. So if you want to avoid it, the ESC is one of the recent standard. Implemented a new keyword that is let, L-E-T. And so if you instead of using var, you use let, then let is block scope. Okay. So in other words, you avoid all the hoisting question with the let. Well, you don't avoid it, but it's closer to what, and so you can talk further on. Yeah, there is another keyword that you will see that is const, C-O-N-S-T, because oftentimes you declare a variable and you don't want to change it. And because everything is mutable, to avoid errors, if you know that you're not going to change it, you should call it with a const. I'm not sure what's the scope of the const though. I think it's similar to the let. The block scope. Okay, so we said that there is no way really to encapsulate to a private variable. But there is a kind of workaround, and the workaround is the closure. So the closure is basically one function that returns another function, and then once you've returned your function that is inside the primary one, then you use it. And when you use it, the arguments that you set up are going to be frozen in. And that's because here you see that this R1, R2, they're within the scope of this outside function. And then when we return this one, if we use them, they're within the scope. So this is handy for doing for setting up object parameters. And you'll see it in some of quite a bit. This is used quite a bit in all the libraries for basically freezing in parameters, and then you use the object with those frozen parameters. Obviously what is true of the outer function is also true of the inner function. So these things are the inner arc here is going. Which is you're going to call it when you call the return function, right? So this is something that you can act upon. But then a local variable that was declared in here that you cannot override, then is going to also stay freedom. So it's not exactly private variables, but it's a mechanism to encapsulate variables and parameters inside the function. Yeah, so we're going to play around with this in the lab, so you can debug it if you want and see how it works. But basically, again, you see here, we call the outer function with 2 and 4. So this R1 or 2 become 2 and 4. And then if you print the result is this function that is an object, and you'll see printed as an object. That it is a function. So here, that it might have changed now. I don't know. This I did maybe last year with Chrome, but now they might have a different notation for printing out the function. But then when you call it, right, I'm going to take this variable here that is a function, and I call it with the value of 4. So here inner arc becomes 4. And the local var that was set up here, it's declared here, but it's also available within the scope because we're in the same scope here. And so this becomes, this is a 2, and I cannot change it anyway after that. And so you see there the calculation of the output. Okay. Yeah, so this one I put, this is just a piece of code that I wrote, or somebody wrote, and I wrote this. Okay. It's just to talk about the things that I already discussed, is the cons, the lets. Then there are, yeah, so we'll see all these things with arrays and sets. There are also things such as maps. That are useful when you want to look up tables. What else is here that is useful? Not much. Yeah, here is it's a node, so we a code that works in nodes, so we're using the require to import a module that is just implements an object in JavaScript. Yeah, and there you see, yeah, different ways of printing with concatenating strings and object with a plus. Now, when you print things, obviously, what gets printed depends on the type of the object. So if it's a function, it's going to write object functions. If it's an array, it's going to, I think it's going to write an array. If you really want to print the array, then what you can do is turn it into JSON. And the thing that I gave you an example last time, where you use JSON.stringify, and you pass the array, and it outputs a string, and that you can just concatenate it on the command line, and you're good to go. Yeah, another one here. Oh, so these are the promises. So we'll get back to this, but so the promises is a mechanism that is, what is it? Maybe 1 or 2 years old. Yeah, yeah, maybe 2 years old. And so the idea is to stop using callback function. Because each time you need to go and get your data or get data remotely with the Ajax, then what happens is that if you don't have, there is no structured way of doing that. So what happens is everybody develops his own functionality for getting the data and processing data asynchronously in the browser. And then when you want to use that functionality, if you're not familiar with it, it's complicated. So the promises, they kind of solve that problem. And it's very simple. It's a little bit complicated to implement, and you see how it's implemented here. So yeah, so I didn't explain this in the lab. So this is another notation for a function. just a function inside a function, so it's implemented as a promise. Sorry. As a closure. And the way you use it is that here I would say just this big news dot then. And the dot then I can specify an argument that is a function that receives the data whenever they are available. And the error handling is done with a catch. So we'll see that. And diffree as and the other libraries that we'll use the same specification. Okay, so yeah, a few minutes. So maybe we start with the lab. So the lab is easy this week, so we can finish it up in 1 hour. Okay. So it's open and it's available at the link here in A2. So if you didn't download it, I think you have time to do it during the break. Okay, and then also to get Inkscape. So let me see. Yeah, so we can do a break now, but if you didn't have time to do this, maybe you can download those pieces so that you can follow along. Okay. Okay, good. unmute. Okay, here we go. Okay. I just want a new one. All right. So why are we using this thing in the first place? So I mentioned that everything that was in the example was in the form of SVG, scalable vector graphics. And so whenever you have two choices, either you do things by code, which we're going to do later on, or you do it with an SVG editor. And Inkscape is such an example. Now you can also blend both, obviously. Okay, so to start, let me see. I have an outline. So yeah, so this is how it looks by default. I think if you go in preferences, theming, you can change this thing. So I'll leave it like this because otherwise I had the bad idea to change it, and yeah, it doesn't do it now, but I couldn't recognize any of the tools. I think I had on system default. Oh, it's the icons, multicolor. Yeah, so if you put something like this, then you're used to the other icons, then you get lost. So I'll use the default that is here. Okay. Now there you have by default, when you open it up, you have a page. So this is defining the space where you can draw. You can draw outside also, but it sets up a bounding box basically for the preview and also what gets exported. So if you want to change that, you can go here on the document properties. So one thing that is useful for us is to maybe change this into pixels. So the axes are now in pixels, and it's easier to draw with them. So yeah, and in the first place, it's important to understand a little bit the coordinate system here, because it's basically the same thing when you put SVG in a page. So you see that here we start at 0, 0 in pixels up left, and that's where if you define an SVG element into here, can I draw here? No. Okay. Okay. I thought I had the blackboard. I could go on the screen, but I cannot. If you add an SVG element into your page, it's going to appear in the form of a block that is a rectangle, and the coordinates are going to be in pixels, starting up left. So exactly the same thing as here. All right. Oops, the one right here. Yeah, so that's it for the coordinate system and page size that you can change in the same in the same location. Now we're going to see how to create lines, circles, and text. I put here, you have shortcuts for the different tools. I tend to click on the buttons, but I think that the shortcuts are kind of useful. So for lines, you want to use the Bezier tool, that is this one. And you just click 2 times and double click at the end. And then you get a line. If you want to do a circle, obviously is the little circle that you get up there. And what you get is an ellipse by default. So if you want to size it as, how do I close this thing here? If you want to size it so that it's a circle, you can try to, oops, sorry. You need to go back to the select tool each time you're done. So if you want to size it, you select it and here you can change the size. Or you can use the handler as soon as you created it. But as you do, if you want a really a perfect circle, you see that you get the coordinates for the circle here, center X, center Y. And this is the width and height of the bounding box. So if you just set the bounding box to 100 and 100, then we got a circle, perfect circle. If you don't want to mess it around with the handler, you can click the little lock here and it's going to lock it in place. So when you resize, it resizes it without stretching in any of the directions. Same thing for the boxes. So here I'm creating a box. So while you're creating it, you can use the handler. The little dot there is to make rounded corners. If you want to make your boxes nice. Once you're done, you just hit a different tool. So here I'm going to the select and transform. And then you can proceed in the same way. Now you see that the lock stays locked for all the shapes that you create. So you want to be a little bit careful with that. Text. The text is down here. Where the shortcut is T. And you see that you have the little A. And then we're going to write hello. Okay. Now to control the font, there is, if I can get the zoom out of the way, there is here a dialog that allows you to change the font, and you can set a default with that if you don't like the one that comes by default. Here it is. So if you want to change, or you can use the boxes up here also to change the font, in which case you only do it for the piece of text that you have selected. Here you can control, you can see a preview, and then you can set as a default with this button. Okay, I think I did through selecting object is the select tool. That is the little arrow that is up here. Yes? Where is the, which one? Sorry? HTML5. Where? Do you want to show me?
The line you just showed. Go back.
Go back. Oh, go back here.
Yeah, so where is this line?
Oh, this is, sorry, this is the same thing as you have for the lab, but I did update with the shortcuts.
Yeah, this one doesn't have it.
Yeah, I'll update later.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's just this slide really. Okay, moving object, fill and stroke. So let me, so the moving, you do this with the, you can do this with the select tool. And or with the arrow keys, if you want to move by 1 pixel, I think you put the shift, you can move by 5 pixels or so on. You can see it moving up here in the X window there. This is with shift, this is with, yeah, it's actually half a pixel. If you want to customize the stroke and fill, then there is this dialog that is up here that allows you to do that. So here you can just go and change the color. And same thing for the stroke. So the width actually of the of what is used, the marker that is used for the stroke, you configure it under stroke style. So if you want to change it to dashes, it's easy, and here you can increase the size. Okay, so And we're working on pixels, right? So yeah, you all sort of customization here if you want to put arrows for the end and the start, but for what we're concerned, we're mostly interested in playing out with shapes. So again, all the customization, basically the CSS part of it goes into this dialogue. Yeah, aligning objects. So sometimes you say if you have axes and then you want to put this circle exactly at here, I don't know what it is, 200 or 300 pixels. What you can do is that you can click and drag. So you click on the rulers and then you can set up this line here that allows you to have a reference. And then you can move your object and you can even snap to it. Or again, you can, if you're working pixel, which is the easiest, you can control it up there. To get rid of these, you just drag them out and they're gone. Oh, so again, whatever, internal error. So I guess we're good for a restart. Yeah, I installed this one some time ago. Maybe you have a more recent version of it. Ignore. Here we go. Okay, yeah, duplicate objects. So if I'm going to create a circle and I want to duplicate it, there is the shortcut that is the Command D. I guess is Windows D, and then, oops, sorry. You need to create it, then, yeah. So they appear one on top of the other exactly when you duplicate. So you need to move to the select tool, and then you can move it. So I'm going to redo with this one. I select it, and then I do the Command D, and now you see that I have created a new one. Okay. So we're going to do a bubble chart, and that comes handy. I think that's about it. Object coordinates and size. I think we discussed it. Yeah, the layers, you can create layers here. It's a stack of layers. So the first one is the one that is on top of the others. And then the little lock allows you to block it from editing. And so you create new layers with the plus, obviously, and you remove them with the minus. I won't show you this, but I've created already an example that is ready for you to play around with. So that has already layers. Resize the page content. Yeah, so when you export, usually you've created, say, a graphic, and so you only want to export what is visible. So if you need to size it, then one thing that you can do is, say, put a rectangle like this, if this is the only thing that you're interested in. Obviously, if you're working in pixel coordinates and you want the 0, 0 up there, then so that it appears in the page in exactly the same way, then you would be a little bit careful here with where you started and where you ended, and that you can get some helpers with the guides. And before you're exporting, obviously you don't want to see a big red rectangle. So what you do is that you can either change its color, which you can also do here in addition to this panel here, or remove the field like this. And then what you do is that you resize the page to this element that is visible, which you can do in here. Resize page to content with the resize page to content. Right? So I think I told you more or less all the pieces that you need. Let's take a look now at the file that we have in the repository. So I'm going to, I'm going just to open it here. Load, is it going to work? Okay, cool. So this is part of, I think, example 7 or something, exercise 7. So here we have, let me close this thing. We have 2 layers. We have, this is a screenshot of what was done in, what is just the example code from Google Charts. So we're going to redo the same in, we want to redo something similar with Inkscape, creating the same type of bubbles and putting the same text where inside the bubbles. And then export it so that we get to understand a little bit what how the tool formats the SVG, how this part is the Inkscape formats the SVG, and then you get familiar with also the SVG. Because whenever we're going to do the custom graphics, then you need to create those SVG shapes, so you know how it works. Yeah, I think that one thing I didn't show is so here. So this is this I already set it up. Obviously, I won't ask you to painstakingly or go and do all the bubbles. So I did most for you. So you can just complete with a few that are missing for the lab. What I didn't show you is how to align objects. So supposing that I create here a bubble and that I size it correctly. Okay, so let's say 90, 90. Okay, and then I want to name it as my bubble. So here to align the my in the middle of the circle, then you would select both of them, and you use the align tools that are up here. So this one and this one will do it. Yeah. Okay. And maybe you want me to redo this? Okay. So I'm going to break it. So you select with Shift both objects. You're on the select tool. You select your circle and then you select your text, and you open this dialog here. That is the align and distribute objects. And then you click on the button that makes sense here is vertical align and horizontal, and it's going to do it for you. So the here is with just 2 objects. Obviously, if you do it with more, you can do it. Similar way here, for instance, for doing the legend, you need to align maybe the middle of the red square with a piece of text. So if I want to add to the legend, I would do something like this. I'm going to put it some color, and then I'm going to select the my and this one, and probably align it like this. So the first one, so there is a rule you see here is the biggest object, but you can change it to the first one that you select if you don't want to move the square. And then it is going to do what you expect. Right. So once you have it there, then you can use the arrows with Shift to move it in place and so on. Yeah. So yeah, we're not going to be super picky, but I try at least to do another circle and another item in the legend, so that it looks so that you understand how to do those shapes. And then to save this, so if you can export picture, because this is what most people are doing, so they have it there marked in this way. But if you want to export your graphic, then you want to do a save as. And here you see that they have two choices. You have the Inkscape SVG and the plain SVG. So for putting into the page, you want the plain SVG because the Inkscape is basically the SVG with Inkscape specific commands so that it remembers which tool you've been using and so on. That is not, that the browser will not understand anyhow. Okay, so export as plain SVG, and then you're good to have it. Yeah. So yeah, if you're this one at some point you will not need it anymore, right? So just delete the layer and you just export the page after you set it up so that you can as I explained before, you want to set up the page so that it only covers the graphic or the part of that you want to export. Okay. And I think that this is one of the last exercises. Oh, actually, okay. Okay, so supposing that you that you do some of this work, and I understand that it's painstaking, so hopefully we'll do it just once, and if we need to do some SVG manually, at least you know how to do it, and that you can use in the graphics, obviously. But if you yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, I'll get back to it later. I think it's easier. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I'll give you an example as we go. Okay. So let's get started with the example one, debugging, etc. So I think I have it. Yeah, I have it open here. So I also think that I cleaned up. Let me remove this from here. All right. So I did the usual, right? I did the code minus n dot in the checked out copy of the repository for the homework. And here you see that I got it to run, but you know that you can look in the README that is here. And so you just need to do the npm install. And then the npm run cert. So here what it's doing is that the file is old again, and there are these vulnerabilities. So we could upgrade the packages if you want to do that. That is obviously allowed. And you can see that here what it did is that it changed the package to JSON. Because the new version of npm has different way of storing this information. Now, this stuff is not really meant for us, but you want to commit it in the repository. Now, if for whatever reason you do some work and then it doesn't pan out, you either end up with bugs that you cannot resolve. Then what you want to do is maybe go back to an earlier version, so you know that you can use the little arrow here to revert. Okay, so this does the git revert to the previous version. That means that as you do anything in both the lab and the homework, you don't want to do too much work at once. Because you might get in a situation where you have too much to lose, and so you're going to spend a lot of time to fix something that is minor because you didn't save a version that was working before. So just try to do one feature at a time, or fix one bug at a time, and always do a commit, and then you move to the next one, so you can go back to to the history. Okay, so the example one, so then you need to run the, I think it's npm run serve. That starts the development server here. There we go. And I'm going to go to the lab. Okay, so this one is a little bit more complicated than the previous one, but all that is asked is really to put in practice. So all the JavaScript, etc., so that you actually get to play with the debugging and so on. So I'll let you do this part here because that's basically what we discussed last time. I think there is the addition here where you can debug it inside the VS Code, and you have the links to the documentation and also on how to step by step to do that. And then I'll move here to the second part that is basically playing around with JavaScript. So yeah, so these are basically the basics of JavaScript into this file. And what I'm asking is that you run it and debug it so that you understand how to do those things. So yeah, I'm going to go about doing what they ask here, that is to put some console log output on all the variables. You see that it's mostly there already. Maybe you want to add one here for foo and one for v, and then to paste the output here and add some screenshots. So okay. So for this, you need obviously to understand a little bit where to go and place these things, but I've put it here for you so that it's easy. Add your code here. So again, this is JavaScript. So we want to put it inside the script tag so that it runs. You could copy and paste this, but this is that you see that this is between a pre-code class JavaScript thingy there. So this is formatted code, and that's why it looks nice. And it's rendered with colored with a JavaScript library that is included. The caveat is that some things need to change because this is just this is plain text code and not JavaScript. So here, for instance, the greater than, sorry, lower than needs to be replaced by the HTML character, otherwise is going to show up as an error. So you don't want, if you copy this, you want to change it to lower, to the symbol, or you can go and copy from here, and that will work. So I'm going to do the wrong thing and do exactly what you should not do, so that we see that there is an error. Okay. Okay. So now the next thing with Visual Studio Code is that it might give us some int. Yeah. So you see that here it says they put the little wiggly line there, so something is fishy. So if we look at this, you see it's here, but we don't get anything, and we're expecting to see something in the console, but we only see the errors, and the first error says syntax error and expected token. And so this is because the browser needs to decide what to do. You got an error in your block of HTML of JavaScript code, and it needs to display something for an end user. That's his mission in life. And so because you have an error, is going to assume that everything that you've written in your JavaScript is bogus, and that it's better that it doesn't do anything with it. Okay, so that's why we see only the errors here, and we don't see any of the logs that are here from the console log. Right, and any of that is not visible. So I'm going to go and fix this. Okay, and here you need to be careful because it thinks that you're in HTML. Okay, and you see that here we still get some errors, but at least the printouts are there. Okay. Now this errors is because there are pictures that are referenced here for the screenshots that are not there, and so those are it needs to show something because our intention is to show a picture, and it's important to the user to know that there should be a picture there, but the picture is not visible, so it's kind of a broken picture. You've seen this already. So say I'm going to take a picture of this here. Okay, and yeah, don't ask me where this is going. I think it's going on the desktop. It's right here. So I'll need to move it into this folder. Yeah, it's this one and the lab. Okay, now we're running the web server up here. So we can put it anywhere we like, as long as we reference it correctly, and we should be able to get to it. But the easiest is probably just to put it alongside the HTML. Okay, so we have it right there. If it's customary to create an images folder and put these things inside, because at least you keep your code and other things separate. Now you see that my screenshot is as a weird name, so it's always better to avoid spaces and things that are complicated. So this is my code, and yeah, the Mac is hiding the extension, but it's probably a PNG, so we're good to go. And then if we want to add it, say we add it here. You see that the Visual Studio Code gives you the completion, so you just tab it and tab it again, and you're done. Sorry, I don't know where we are anymore. Yeah, and so we should have now one error less. Yeah, we have one error less, and we see the picture here that appears. Okay, so it's not too complicated, but it's good that you know how to do these things. Eventually, when you do your work, and this is just for the homework and also for the lab, you want to make sure that you don't have errors in the page. Good form. Okay, so I think we're done. Let's move to the exercise 2. Yeah, we will get. I think we can get this done quickly. Okay, so exercise 2. So the web server is running, and so all we need to do is go. Where did we have it? Oh, it's here. It's here. So you know, when you're working, maybe it's useful if you have Visual Studio Code in one side and then the browser on the other side. It's up to you. I prefer to switch windows because my site is not that great, so I prefer to see things in big. Okay, so here we have the example 1. So if you want to go to example 2, obviously you just do like this. I don't know what happens if you just do lab. Yeah, so this doesn't work all the time. You should have a server that is actually, when you deploy pages on a server, that's a configuration of the web server. So here the configuration says that if you show me a folder and don't see any text, then I'm going to list the contents of it. Okay, so if you don't remember the name of the exercise, that's one way to get to it. So we're going to go to 2. Okay, so this one is basically playing with code. You get some sample code and then they ask you to finish it. So I'm going to try to do it. Okay, so this is you see here, it's an array of objects. So this is the array, and here we see the object. So what is asked is that you add something with your first and last name. So we're going to do like this. Oops, I should learn how to spell my name. Okay, so this is good. And you see that it's fine if you leave a comma after. In the code, it's fine. Nothing bad happens. The interpreter is happy with that. Obviously, if you remove it, nothing bad happens either. And now, because in arrays, things are separated with a semicolon, with a colon. If you put a semicolon, then probably bad things will happen. Oh, by the way, I'm writing here in the code preview, which is not very useful, and that's why we don't get any error. Okay, so where is it? Oh, your code here. Okay, so we need to copy this again. Okay, now the story of copying is what we've been doing last time with the Google script, right? So, I mean, these things are usually complicated when you want to use libraries from other folks. So it's always best to start from an example. You get the example to work, and then you change it so that it works for you. Okay. So I'm not doing it so that you just lose your time here. Okay. Okay. So my example was like this. So you see that this reloads, but then we get the wiggly lines, so that there is a problem. And if we go in the browser, we get the exception there for the semicolon. Okay. So yeah, so the advantage of having things that run side by side is that whenever you make a mistake and you save, because you need to save for the browser to see that the file has changed, and then it reloads the browser. Then you would see it right away. Function declaration that returns the full name of a person as a string. So this is a function declaration. Here the argument is p. So we want to return the full name of a person as a string. Okay. All right. So okay. P. Oh, okay. So we're going to pass one of these objects. I think that's the idea. So here, if we want to return a string, we can do return p dot. Oops, sorry. P dot first. I'm sorry. I have one of these keyboards that is defective, and the space never works. Plus p dot last. Yeah. So you can write this with the double quotes or the single quotes. It doesn't really matter. just try to be consistent. I tend to use single quotes because I think it's cleaner in the code, but they're basically the same thing. You can write this now in different ways. So you can use the string interpolation like this. That makes it a little bit nicer to read, but you know, any way will work. Function expression that returns the full name of person as a string. This is basically the same, right? So here the distinction is that this is a function declaration. Because it's a declaration, it gets hoisted to the top of the scope. So is the same thing as declaring this function here as saying that is going to be right here. Yeah. And that means that whenever you use a function declaration, then you can use it anywhere. If I'm going to use this full name, then the function expression here needs to be already declared, otherwise I'm going to have trouble using it. Yeah. Okay, so that's basically okay. Full name using arrow. So this is again the same thing as this with the arrow notation. So the arrow notation, you can do it like this. This is so actually the simplest for the arrow notation is this. That will yeah, no, I think you still need to yeah, I don't know if this works, but usually if it's just a one-liner that is p dot first plus, I'm going to do just this p dot last. Yeah, you oftentimes you do these things. Now, if you have multiple arguments, then you usually get P and B. And if you have multiple lines, then you are required to put the braces. Actually, we needed a return there. Yeah. Now, in JavaScript, if you have one or here you see that we have an argument that we're not going to use, that we're not using, you can do that. It's fine. Its value is going to be, if I do a console log here of B, what do I get? So I'm going to call this function here full name of persons 1. Okay, so I just call it with one argument. What is the value of B, or what am I going to get? Huh? Undefined. Okay. So because nobody is defining it, so by default it's going to be undefined, living within the scope of the function. Okay. Now the rest here, I'll let you play with it. I think it's fairly simple to do it. So here, I think that the only thing is here. I think there is a little typo there. So here I'm asking if can you do this assert function so that you only pass function 1 and function 2. You don't pass the third argument, right? And so it's simple. You just need to do a check here if value equals. So exactly the same thing is the triple equal. This is equal, which here it doesn't really matter because we're not dealing with objects, but undefined. Yeah. And in that case, I'm going to undo the case to do the assert where I have only two arguments here, so that are function 1 and function 2. Okay. Ternary operator. Okay. So the ternary operator, I'm going to show it to you here. So instead of writing if value equal undefined, else. So let's say that here we're going to create let. I'm using let so that I don't run into trouble. Let whatever a equal first. Okay. Okay. I don't know if this is sensical, but so here we're going to put undefined, and here we're going to put defined. Okay. So if I want to implement this in a one-liner using the ternary operator, this is what I would write. I would say let a equal, then you put value, question mark, the if, first if case, result. So then we would just put undefined, semicolon, defined. All right. Okay, I think you have the same in Python. Okay, and here is just to print out the output. Number 3. Okay, so this is the always thing. So what I can do is maybe try to get the example. Yeah, I mean the always thing you just need to look at my slide from before, and it's basically redoing that, right? So you play around with the debugger so you understand actually what is happening. So this one, I don't think that there is much to do about it. This quiz question is just for you to look at them so that you wrap your head around some of the tricky questions here that are asked. The 5 is the bubble chart, and the 6 is the bubble chart within scape, which I have explained, and the 7 is using a little bit. Do we have time? Right, I don't have time. Yeah, I thought that I had something with the closure. So what I suggest you do if you don't understand the closure is that you take the code that I have in the slides, you put it in one of these pages, and you debug it. Okay? But basically the idea is, again, that every variable you declare with var or just put it in as a declaration when you say variable, but without the var equal, is a variable that is created within the scope, the current scope, and the scope of the variables in JavaScript declared with var is the function in which they live. And so you just need to wrap your head around what happens to a variable that is inside of a function that gets returned. So play around with the logic. If you don't understand it, I can help out in Slack. And this one you'll see is basically here we're doing the poor man's version of a library for drawing some shapes, so that we can use this to do a bubble chart. And so you see that we have functions to write text, circle, create circles, and so on, that are centered to in an SVG element. Yeah. So the code is supposed to already to give you something, so you just need to finish it up with the coordinates that you can get from the template work that you do in cleaning state. Okay. So yeah. So not too complicated. I think a couple of hours you should be able to finish this up. If you have questions, so the homework, because Monday is a holiday, I think it's it's 1 week from now. Yeah, I think this one is
week from now.
is for
So,
the
eight.
it's on the 8th. Yeah.
I still don't know how to debug this. I can't find the
Let me just stop the Zoom here so that